Yeah. All right, so I'm just going to get started. So I'm Leah Del Percino. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Trustate. Trustate closes estates at the click of a button using care, compassion, and technology. And Antonio?
Yeah, thanks very much, Leah. I'm Antonio Piraino. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so they can see us.
Yeah.
For a second, thanks. I'm Antonio Piraino. I'm the CTO of MethodData. You will learn a little bit more about MethodData through the course of the presentation. But fundamentally, we're based in the greater Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. We focus specifically on solutions and integrations between third-party applications, particularly with the SMB and startup market in mind, like Leah's company.
Great. So with that, we're going to get started. I wanted to, do you have the?
Yeah, I will call it up in 1 second.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Leah, go ahead. I'll get this organized.
Sure. We wanted to get started with a question to sort of level set and see, who our audience was. So, you know what? It only shows the percentage. It doesn't show the question, interestingly. So it's just showing the progress, not the answer. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm looking at it on my end. I really am not a technologist. So, so I see lots of people are starting their own company, and surprisingly, no one's on their way to Disney World. Hey, Antonio, your screen is not showing the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to, there we go. Is that better?
That's much better. Awesome. So anyway, we see that a lot of you are starting your own enterprise, or you're, thinking about it. And we are really here today to talk about what happens when you have a groundbreaking idea, but you don't have the technical background to execute on your vision, and really what you should do. And part of the framework for this conversation started with my own entrepreneurial journey, where I am a recovering trust and estates lawyer. Spent over 10 years practicing estate and trust law. So dealing with, when people had a loved one who passed away, all of the paperwork and headache that surrounds that. And one day I thought to myself, wow, people are really being underserved. They're spending hours and hours on manual administrative work that could likely be, revved up and really increased in efficiency by technology. So I was not a technologist. I knew there was technology out there that could automate the process and that, eliminate that paperwork and headache for people, but I didn't know exactly how to deliver on it. So I first started really digging into that problem and learning what people were dealing with. I had an idea in my mind that this was mildly annoying for people, but truly didn't realize the gravity of it until later on in the process. Because the first step I took was to, again, interview people. So I started interviewing people from all over and all walks of life, and learning about their, how they coped with doing all of the paperwork and the headache when they were named as the executor of an estate. And what that is that's the person who's, appointed to represent an estate when someone passes away, and what that was like for them, what their experience was like, what the problem was like. And what I learned was that it was so ungodly awful for everyone involved. For people tasked with this role, it was often during a time of great grief and emotional strife because they had just lost a close loved one. And then they had all this headache of this paperwork to do. So I knew the paperwork was mildly annoying, didn't realize quite how awful it was for most people. And really the only people who weren't tasked with this were people who could afford to spend not even tens of thousands of dollars, but really hundreds of thousands of dollars to have their lawyers just do it all for them. So me thinking, wait, this isn't legal work. It's really administrative work. And there's got to be ways to, increase efficiencies in this process. So What I did next was thought, oh, okay, I need to find a CTO. So I set about my way of looking for someone who had front-end development experience and back-end development experience, and really trying to find someone who could build what I saw as my vision, before really testing it out on clients or anything like that. What ended up happening, to make a very long story short, was that I found, a person, and they ended up not being the right fit. They wanted a large percentage of my company. It seemed like they were capable of doing the work, but I didn't feel comfortable with the number. So I actually went to the ETC, and my question to them was, what should I do? Should I let this person have this big stake in my business for this? I get the feeling that most of the development that's being done isn't quite that difficult, and I really want to understand it. And what I learned at the ETC was I didn't really need a CTO at that point. What I needed was a CTO for 4 hours to direct the development team to build what I needed to build. So with that said, I ended up continuing on my way, and thought, rather than spend all this time vetting people and getting burned and wasting time trying to find a CTO, why don't I learn enough about technology? I'm a fast learner. I had passed a few bars as a lawyer, so I knew how to learn, and I also was very passionate about my mission that I saw through my business, and basically built my own prototype to work with the clients on, and that's really, I think where and I'm curious, and would love to open it up if anyone else is sort of in that boat where they have this great idea and they're not quite sure where to go next, and whether they need to hire a tech person and they can't even imagine, because it seems too overwhelming, building their own prototype. So I'd love to get some thoughts about that, if anyone wanted to share anything in the chat regarding their experience, reducing their big idea to practice if they have one.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second, Leah, and just say, yeah, please, we want to make this as interactive as possible. There's not a lot of us on this call, so we're very happy to make it as interactive and customized around what you want to learn as possible. I would also say, please chat with everyone. I know not everybody likes that, but we're a small group. We won't judge you. But that way we can all see the questions and/or commentary coming in. And I think probably also time for a poll, so that as we get the responses, we can keep your story going, Leah, as well, because I think the question you had was around the technologies that a lot of people use that are freely available online today. A lot of the sort of SaaS and apps that are available, right?
Yeah, and we'd love to know, whether you're a developer or someone who's well versed with tech or not, what do you use?
Right, so hopefully all of you are seeing the poll. If you're not seeing the poll or the screen, etc., please chat with us.
Yeah. And so it looks like a lot of people are using, Microsoft Office Suite, which is great, or G Suite, Google Suite. HubSpot is a big one, Calendly, and then lots of people with pen and paper, which I love. That's where all the magic happens in my mind.
Terrific. So, Leah, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Sure.
So with that in mind, so not everyone perhaps is familiar with all the various apps that are out there, but some of them we would have been familiar with, like Office 365 from Microsoft and Gmail and so on. But why don't you tell us how you got going with those technologies?
Sure. Again, I knew that, having a CTO right off the bat, when I truly didn't understand the problem set as deeply as I do now, was going to be, expensive equity-wise, but then also hiring a developer team as an outsourced partner was going to be expensive cost-wise. And when you just have an idea, you really don't have either of those things, particularly if you're doing testing on your idea, learning what really speaks to what a customer needs. So I had identified this problem and thought, why don't I hypothesize a solution and rather, take my rudimentary tech skills at the time and build a prototype. And what I did was something I call the Frankensteining small secret, which was I took existing technologies, whether it be project management software, whether it be an Office suite or Google suite, really leveraged every single feature they offered, and then used, something like a Zapier to glue them together in a way that basically accomplished what I wanted for our clients. And sure, it was in a little bit of a messier way than something smooth where you're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on development. But really what it enabled me to do was learn what my clients were using, what they liked, and what they didn't necessarily use, and also helped me refine exactly what I was building and really refine that vision in a way that met product market fit. So that's what I call the Frankensteining small secret. What was really interesting during this time was that I realized that there's also the Frankensteining big secret. Steve, I see you have a question, so feel free to jump in.
I can't see the chat, so I'm going to ask Amy to perhaps read the question or chat out if there is one.
He raised his hand, so.
Okay.
Maybe.
Oh, go ahead. Interrupt us by all means.
I don't know where he went. In any event, I'll just go back to what I was saying. So essentially what I realized was by knowing enough about technology to become dangerous, and rather than spending my time vetting, CTOs and a full technical team, learning a little bit about tech myself so that I could understand how my small Frankenstein interacted with each other, sort of the bedrock behind how all of these applications work, enabled me to realize later on, when I did hire a developer team and knew exactly what I wanted to build and had a very clear direction that really was a fit for our clients, that what that was truly the Frankensteining big secret. It was that, any developer you're working with, whether they're a CTO or they're an outsourced team, is also going to be using some pre-existing applications via open source software and other things of that nature to actually sort of patch together the same way your prototype was patched together, but with a lot more advancements and make it a lot more smoother. So having that initial prototype was super helpful for that reason.
I'm gonna jump in, Leah, and ask you perhaps to go back a little bit to the small Frankenstein secret, because that may be of interest to the audience as well. Again, if most people are using paper and pen, it may be too advanced to jump to the big Frankensteining one right now. But why don't you talk a little bit about some of these apps specifically and how you came across them, and how you even knew when they probably weren't going to be enough at some point. That makes sense.
Sure, and it was kind of funny. For a lot of them, I thought, okay, I need a project management software that does X, Y, and Z so that my clients could upload and download documents. There was a level of security and compliance. There were, all of these bells and whistles that our clients truly needed in order to, use our service in a way that was efficient. And the clients didn't really see that from their end. It was really more on the administrative side. And what I learned was that, that process and doing that was really just simple Google searches, oftentimes trying to navigate through, whether it be Product Hub type listings and figuring out what each had, trying different things. What's great about a lot of the small Frankenstein products are that there are 14-day free trials. You just have to remember to cancel them. So what I would do is I'd build prototype A on one platform and with, one group of software patched together. And then I would move to prototype B and move it on a different platform with all different software patched together and see what worked and what didn't work.
Can I be a pain and ask for an example? So how did you use, so G Suite, for example, what did you use within that Google Suite?
Sure. So, we ended up really using Google Suite for many, many things. So one thing is a secure document repository. So we're able to use it to share documents with clients. We used it internally. We also used the forms function in G Suite. and also HubSpot, where we were able to use some of the interactive form software that they have rather than buy another third-party software, because those begin to add up, to really, build something that made sense for our clients, where the clients didn't notice any depreciation in value. They still were getting the same service delivered to them, but we were able to sort of, embed something on a page or what's called an iframe, which Antonio can explain, in a way that it was seamless for the client.
Oh, and something like Zapier, that sounds a little bit beyond most people in terms of, it sounds a little convoluted, right? How did you figure that one out?
And the way I would explain Zapier, it's actually, our initial marketing person who told me about Zapier, but it was a way to string together various low cost, low code applications. So you could take something like G Suite and link it to, your HubSpot or your Airtable or your Trello, and truly create automation by being very detailed with what you're moving to where, to the point where you could get data from one application, use Zapier and string it together and put it on a spreadsheet on something like a Google Sheet. And really it all works with cloud-based software. So it's part of the migration of moving to the cloud is really where Zapier can be of help.
But it took some learning, I guess.
Oh, yes, lots of trial and error. But again, that whole experience of having that trial and error enabled me to know more about the technology. So later on, when I did have the resources and the direction in hiring an actual developer team, I knew A, what kind of developers I needed. I knew B, how to manage them and truly be the product manager of what I was actually building, in a way that was probably interesting for Antonio. So I was able to, work with MethodData, hire them, and they can, Antonio, you could probably speak to what you were seeing from people who didn't build their own prototype versus clients who had built their own prototype, from a tech savviness and management perspective of managing your team through your clients.
Yeah, there are pros and cons, I guess, to doing the small Frankensteining yourself. And the big pro, of course, I guess, is, you tell us, Leah, but money saving, right? And I notice a lot of people here are starting their own company or thinking about it, who are on this call as well. And I guess going out, you did Google searches, you've kind of realized you needed forms, you needed email for your business, you needed a task manager, a calendar capabilities, and then started to get a little bit more advanced with integrations and so on, and started doing more and more of your own homework and really getting into it, which was great. The great news for a team like MethodData is that, as you said, you became our de facto product manager or product owner. And we'll talk more about that in the process of development later on, and how that's very helpful to us to have somebody who knows exactly what they're looking for and what you were missing because of the small Frankenstein that you had built. On the downside, of course, is that it consumes your time, right? You were sitting up with your child ungodly hours of the night, trying to figure stuff out. So it can be a little bit challenging for somebody who's not completely tech savvy.
But you know what, though? The challenge is a good challenge, because when you truly have an idea that you believe in, and you have the skin in the game of where you've taken that leap into entrepreneurship, you know your vision better than anyone else, including an in-house or outsourced, tech team. So to be able to implement what you need in that vision, you're going to get more help early on by doing it yourself rather than hiring someone to do it for you. Knowing the functionality that you believe you need to execute on what you're trying to do is extremely, extremely important. And I think that's why you see a lot of larger companies who have in-house tech teams that maybe the tech doesn't really touch the client pain, because you have a team that's detached from what's actually going on the ground. And then you have people who are dealing with the client who aren't actually well-versed enough on technology to know what features to apply and how to direct their tech team. So you can have all the money in the world in terms of building something, but you can never build it as well as a company that has that all, in one singular place with a singular focus, because they truly know where the problem is and
Right.
have the vision, and then can go and pick the features in a lot better ways. Rarely do you see someone who's on the customer side that also is a product manager.
That's right. And I think that's very helpful as well for both sides of the equation. For us on the development side and the solutioning side, it's great to have somebody who knows exactly what they want and what they don't want and what the business needs. Because otherwise we start throwing technologies out there, and you start to feel like a car mechanic because you brought your car to us. We're meant to be the experts. We're going to tell you that you need a new exhaust pipe and fan belts. And you're saying, wait a second, this cost is going up all over the place dramatically. Whereas, you could be quite specific on what you needed, and then we could adjust the technology to what your requirements were, or where the shortfallings were on those smaller, more commercially off-the-shelf applications, right? And I guess that's what led us to the big secret Frankensteining, which can potentially be a runaway train if you don't have that trust element or that knowledge of exactly what's needed.
Yeah, a very expensive runaway train too. And I think it's important to note that, Trustate has worked with Method for, nearly a year now. And one thing I think that was a critical element to our success in building something that clients love is the fact that we had clients working with our Frankensteining small secret prototype. So we had them working with, and we were truly able to be responsive to what they used in our product and our prototype that we built, and what they didn't use, and where the real value was. And you can only truly get that from user behavior. So one thing it allowed us to do was to truly have, a customer-driven experience, because we were able to be responsive because, hey, we had customers. We saw what they wanted. We saw that, the in-house messaging and chat system in our build wasn't that important. So that became a lower priority from a dollars perspective, because clients were more comfortable using email anyway. And that's just one kind of example. But truly able to make it user-centered design, and build something that, as we learned on, the business side, the direction of the business truly drove the direction of the development in a way that, we feel has added to our success and to our clients being really happy with what we've built.
So Leah, let me put you on the spot. You say the clients were really happy with what you designed, but you also say here, build it and they will come as a lie. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is exactly sort of what I was saying. So if I had just built hired Method to build immediately before designing my own prototype, and then thought, okay, well, clients will come and join this, and just based it on my own hypotheses with respect to the problem that clients were experiencing, I would have been way, way off, and really had wasted Method's time and my own time and money. So what I mean by build it and they will come is a lie is that you truly need to be looking at how the users are using what you initially built, and then build something better that's responsive to where they're, allocating their time and usage on your site. Got
it. And yeah, that responsive design is really critical.
Yeah.
And we could talk all day about that. So how did you actually find us? How did you find the tech partner? And because I'm sure that there's plenty of ways to go wrong there too. But.
Sure. So it's actually a funny anecdote, the way I found Method. I was still working on my prototype. Again, it actually worked pretty well and pretty seamlessly, and our clients were fairly happy with it. There were some bugs in terms of, I was building on third-party software. So there was less I could control on the, the site maintenance and things of that nature. Anytime they'd run an update, it would break small Frankenstein, and then I would have to go back in and fix it. Really good for drinking from the fire hose in learning development. But again, I knew that there were problems with what I was building, not from a user standpoint, but from an administrative backend standpoint. So I also at the time had wanted to use Method's dashboard system. So I asked Method to go, and I had found Method. I happened to be vetting developers for this larger second build, really wasn't finding any that I was communicating with who truly shared my vision, believed in what I was doing, and understood what I was trying to build. So I had hired Method to see if they could build out this dashboard, and kind of at the exact same time, one of our third-party products had run a software update, and I ended up having to go back in and fix a bunch of things very quickly. And the Method team, I told them about this, and they said, we could build this for you, and we can build you, you know what you need now. You have an idea of how your clients are using your site. We think you can give us the direction that we need to build something amazing. And hey, we do more than dashboards. With your direction, we can truly, create something incredible that your clients love, especially because of where you are in your business. And that was really where I sat down with Antonio and Sebastian and their team of developers and said, okay, here's what I need to build. Here's where the holes are in Small Frankenstein. Here's what my priorities are, and truly build out a cohesive product roadmap for that.
Terrific. So, and not to beat a dead horse, but I guess you had to kiss a few frogs and eventually found us, I think, even through one of your marketing contacts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I had hired a marketing person because, again, build it and they will come is a lie. I needed to have customers and clients and users on our site to really understand, how they were using it, so I could be smart about where I allocated money from a developer cost perspective. So I had hired a marketing person much earlier on over hiring a tech person, and they happened to know the Method team and got me connected to them. So it ended up working really, really well. And believe it or not, we really found everyone through Baltimore Innovation Week. I had found my marketer through that. He was giving a talk on the lean startup method, which I loved and obviously identify with, because frankly, that's exactly what Small Frankenstein and Big Frankenstein is. He really understood that and it resonated with him. So he was able to connect me to Method, and then, things just took off from there.
Great. Well, just a quick recap, I guess, of your journey.
Sure.
I guess in your words, maybe, rather than mine.
Sure. So as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, I built a DIY prototype, again, using the Small Frankenstein method, or i.e. the lean startup method, by patching together existing products, being able to find things that were white labelable. So my clients and users had a seamless and smooth customer experience. A lot of those things still work really well, which is wonderful and enables us to continue to learn. I learned about how those users were interacting with our software, what worked with them, what didn't, what parts they liked the best, what features they liked the best. We really crawled before we walked. And then through there, figured out what to design first, how to design it, built a roadmap, and had steps in place that I planned out with my smarter CTO hire, i.e. MethodData, so they truly understood what I was trying to do. And then we worked together and, were able to build something that's, truly remarkable and ahead of its time.
Terrific. Thanks. Well, I'm going to, oops, I'm not sure if somebody's trying to change the pages with me. I think, I was going to jump in here and use an example of being technology-led versus business-led. It might be a bit of a raw example, but if you look on the internet, you'll find loads and loads of examples of this. So this really speaks to what Leah was talking about, right? If the idea is that if you try to lead things from a technology perspective, or you engage with technologists, we're going to simply try to solve the problem by throwing technology at you and saying, sure, we can build you a pencil. Oh, you wanted a design on the pencil? No problem at all. But what is not well thought out in this particular example, for example, is that 90% of the use of this pencil, right, actually portrays the wrong message, right? So instead of the too cool to do drugs, you suddenly got awkward messaging around cool to do drugs, drugs. So the point here is really that if things are not business-led from the get-go and worked through from start to finish with a vision, you end up on a downhill slide, which is extremely hard to recover from and push back up. And I can tell you that firsthand happens over and over again, where you then try to turn things around on the technology, and it gets even more expensive, duplicitous, and just portraying the wrong ways of doing business, and everybody starts wasting a lot of time. So it's very important from the get-go, from a process perspective, to be business-led, not technology-led. Understand what the business needs are, what the customer desires are, be responsive to that need. I know it sounds very obvious, but it's all too easy to throw technology at the problems and it goes awry. So
Yeah.
don't be technology-led.
Antonio, I'm curious as to whether you'd agree that, that throwing money at the problem a lot of times really actually makes things worse. And I think, in my perspective, you see it with some of the technology that comes out of larger companies that's really awful.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious as to, if you have experience with that and, what your take on that is.
Yeah, no, that is exactly right. It's a fine balance, right? If you don't throw any money at the problem, I've run into large enterprises that have open source technologies in place because open source is free. Well, guess what? Open source is not free. It's not free because sooner or later you need somebody to lead that open source development because somebody has to stitch it all together. And then you end up with big companies who have lots and lots of, t-shirt wearing young DevOps people who are trying to, be really cool and develop all kinds of things that the average CTO can barely keep up with. And suddenly it's a runaway train. And now you've got a huge host of developers.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you're saying hiring a tuxedo wearing person to help you is the way to go.
Exactly. Any CTO wearing a tuxedo for an event like this is somebody to be trusted. And if you don't know what we're talking about, we'll show you at the end of this presentation. That's right. Thanks for making fun of me. It was really just to impress you, Leah. But yeah, the point being, it really can. So even when you're trying to be inexpensive, it can get expensive for you in the long run. And I've seen so many times where even those open source technologies and custom builds eventually run out of runway because the developers move on to other things or other businesses. Somebody needs to maintain it, and eventually you end up moving across to proprietary technologies that become very expensive. And again, if you keep throwing lots of money at the technologies and the people, you will overconstruct and frankly not grow with your customer base as well, or as a company. So it's a fine balancing act. And frankly, at the end of the day, trust is critically important too. And having people that I think understand your business, want to understand your business from the get-go. I know I'm harping on this, but it has to be business-led. So what we, really try to engender in the organization is let's understand the business of our customers, make them partners, so that we're vested in their success too. Because frankly, your success, Leah, for example, is our success as well at the end of the day. And we know that if you're succeeding, we will continue to innovate and build out a roadmap that'll have our developers doing imaginative, cool things, which is what they always want to do. And we want to stay close with you and have your success. But you have to be listening to the customer. That responsive design that you talked about is easy to say, not always easy to implement. You have to be mapping out continuously often. And that's what, frankly, in larger organizations, product owners do. And Leah became our product owner, understanding the workflows that she wanted in response to making her end product as customer-centric, as intuitive and as easy to use as possible, without the back end being overly simplistic. So it needs to present itself in a simplistic manner, using technologies where available. But again, we first incorporated the customer feedback in the processes, focused our development around targeted workflows that have been well-defined, and we continue to do that on a weekly basis. And I'll talk about that in a second, about what that weekly approach is, before we then align the technologies to driving the customer engagements. So there's no point in going out and saying, hey, let's throw everything on Amazon. Let's use the latest, coolest, microservices approach to solving your problems, because it could be overkill. We know that we want to build this stuff out, but we're doing it on a piecemeal basis, as and when we're growing out more and more functionality, as the customers get used to using the site as well.
Yeah, and I also think, just to interject there, I think it's so important to find, if you are using an outsourced tech team, that they truly don't feel like an outsourced tech team, that they are your true partner and that they're invested in your success. So being able to vet that, I think, is extremely important. But having the technological wherewithal and learning a little bit about it yourself is a way to really be able to make a smart decision there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I'm being told that we don't have a lot of time left, so I'll try to race through this, excuse the pun, as we start describing the idea behind sprints. And sprints, for those who don't know, and I'm sure many of you do, it is a concept that is used in agile software development nowadays. And the idea behind sprints is exactly that, to do sprint work in short bursts of time, rather than the age-old approach where somebody had a ginormous project and they just said, hey, go out and build this over 3 months, build it, and then throw it in my lap and let's see what you've built. And then you start to react to it. And that's when a lot of money gets spent. So the idea behind being agile is that you have short bursts of sprint. They should be no longer than a month long. Often they're 2 weeks long in many product organizations. We do 1 week long sprints. That way we can be even more reactive and responsive to Leah and her end customers as well, understanding that we're going in the right direction. Also, as things change, the idea behind agile development is that you should not be surprised by change and change requests. And you should not be, wasting time figuring out what the source of that change need is. You should simply be able to execute upon the change request and requirements from your product owner and product manager. The idea behind sprints is very similar to, a sprint team. And I use the example here of the US women's relay team that had tremendous success. They've had failures along the way, but now it's a very well-honed process. And it starts out with having your stakeholder expectations well set in advance. Everybody understands what it is that you're trying to build towards, what are the use cases, what are the workflows that you're trying to design around, and what are the priorities to the business, not the priorities for the developers, right? And then you move on to the actual planning stage, right? And every sprint starts up front with a planning stage. So every single week we have a planning stage. Every single day we have a 15-minute stand-up to ensure that everybody is still aligned to the plan and how's it running, right? And where there's assistance needed. In the case of the relay team, they actually walk. You may have seen it many times. They'll walk around the track, knowing how to pass the baton off to each other, because that's a critical element of the continuous development process of the sprint itself. At the end of every week, you actually do have 2 meetings. You have a feedback meeting directly with the customer to sort of say, this is what we developed. Is it any good? Leah says, okay, I like what you've done. Oh, wow, you stretched and you achieved that. Or, hey, guys, you're moving a bit slowly. Or, you know what, you kind of missed this, or this is a new priority, et cetera, et cetera. And simultaneously, what we do is we then have an internal, right after that call, a sprint retrospective to say what worked, what didn't work. In the relay team on August 18th, 2016, many will remember during the Olympics that the women's relay team actually ended up dropping the baton and having a big catastrophe. They should have been the fastest sprinters there, but obviously it looked like game over until somebody retroactively looked at the actual race itself and said no, they were bumped and interfered with. They made it to the finals, and the rest is gold, right? Tested, refined. And then there's the continuous feedback loop where they now set the next expectation for the next race. And that's exactly how sprints work in development cycles too, from a high level. From a bit more of a granular detailed perspective, sorry, I don't know why it's jumping around. The technologies that we started using with the back end from the front end JavaScript UI, we then had yet another container that needed to be managed as well for the back end. So all of this, suffice to say, was being managed on the Amazon back end, but we had to stitch these components together and know when we wanted to instigate these services, not have them running on a full-time basis, right? Everything had to be triggered in an automated fashion as and when needed on a bespoke or ad hoc basis, as there was incoming tasks that needed to be accomplished. Or, for example, perhaps using AWS Lambda for asynchronous requests, meaning if somebody uploaded a document, some kind of legal document, for example, that then needed to be retained in a repository, we used Amazon S3 to retain that document that could then be called upon to extract information as needed to populate other templates, for example. So everything was very deliberate, and the technology applied specifically to the use cases as well. So with that being said, a quick poll again, just to keep everybody on their toes and feet. So if we're not getting enough chat and interaction from you, we're going to ask the poll. How many of you are currently using any one of these following systems? Are they well known to you? Are you familiar with these big cloud systems? Are you even using them? You probably have heard of them, obviously, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, etc. Or are you using absolutely none of them and you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about? Give us the feedback. We'd love to hear. And I'm going to ask Leah to tell me, I cannot see, unfortunately, the results.
So AWS is the front runner here. Some people are using Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. Those two are 50% of our attendees. DigitalOcean is coming in fourth at 25%, and Red Hat Private Cloud at 13%. And one 13% has no idea what the heck we're talking about.
Love it. We love that honesty. We're going to find you as a customer. No, we're just kidding. All right, that's really interesting. So that means that these technologies are real and in play, and everybody's starting to use the cloud in some format. But it's simply a matter of how do you stitch it all together, and are you optimizing the functionality? Very quickly on our, I think this is our last slide before we move to Q&A, if there's time for it. I guess the pros and cons that we talked about, maybe Leah, you can speak to this, but I guess from my perspective, the big pro was you arrived ready, understanding what you expected from us, and we loved it. The con is that you chewed up a lot of time that perhaps otherwise could have been spent along the way, focusing on your core business, right? And so it's a fine balancing act between the two of them.
Yeah, see, I would argue that it was actually, there really weren't any cons to it.
Okay.
Maybe the cons were that I, didn't give up a huge chunk of equity to someone who, wasn't really deserving of it.
That would have been a con.
But,
yeah.
I also, had brought on a co-founder who was handling a lot of the operational things. So we were able to divide and conquer. So I had, some of the time freedom to really experiment technologically and really work on products. So, we're able to divide our labor and our efforts up a little bit. So, definitely someone very wise told me when I was starting the business that your first hire is not a CTO, it's a chief operating officer. And, with that was, good advice.
That was good advice. All right, I know we're running out of time, so we're going to move to questions. Please feel free to contact us, obviously, at with Leah to learn more about her business and her and what she went through the process at trustate.com as contact us, or by all means get hold of us at methoddata.com as well. We'd love to hear from you.
Any questions?
I'm going to stop the screen share for a second, and hopefully that way people can finally see my tuxedo. Do we have any?
First question might be, why are you wearing a tuxedo? And you
I'm wearing a tuxedo out of respect for all of you, most especially Leah, who decided to wear a t-shirt today, just to show her up.
I'm slacking.
Leah's really cool. She's a techie cool, and I was trying to dress like a lawyer to be as impressive as possible.
We were changing roles.
But mostly because Leah said double dog dare yesterday to wearing a tuxedo. That's the real reason.
Right, I guess we don't have any questions. Well, with that, thank you all for coming. I hope this was informative, and feel free to contact, either of our teams if you have any additional questions.
Thanks everybody for your time today.
Thank you.
Take care. Oh, there is one chat.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jenna.